Good morning, Fred. How are you?
Good morning, Anil. I'm good. And you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, bud. It did snow on Sunday, so I know we've not talked weather in a while, but that was incredible. London felt like a winter wonderland. It was brilliant.
I saw the pictures. That was cool.
Yeah, man. You were on the ski slopes.
I was.
Oh, man,
So I
I
got some
love.
snow too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just maybe an inch or two to kind of help, kind of keep the skis moving.
Mm,
Uh, so randomly, speaking of skiing, topic for today is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And despite being from Colorado, I remember my first time going skiing and being incredibly uncomfortable. Uh, but today we're going to chat more about the feeling that we get and how that can, I don't know, that can kind of permeate and kind of lead to anxiety, lead to stress. And I think it's a topic that I won't be. Sorry, I'm going to be completely honest. I actually really love this topic
mm.
because for the last 5 years I've been on a journey to becoming more comfortable being uncomfortable. So um, I'll tell you a bit more about that from a family and how I was raised perspective. But just from your side, mate, what are your thoughts? Initial thoughts on being comfortable being uncomfortable?
Yeah, when you dropped this topic in a message, it resonated straight away. So I thought, yeah, that's a good one. Let's do it. Um, because it's so common, right, to feel uncomfortable. A lot of things make us uncomfortable for all sorts of different reasons. Um, So I thought, yeah, that'll be an interesting one. And of course, like everyone, it's something that I've thought about at different points in my life. Both, I would say, on a small scale, things make us uncomfortable in the moment,
Hmm.
and then it's like a sensation, and then it's something bigger. I think we can be uncomfortable on a bigger level, for example, or being comfortable or uncomfortable with uncertainty. It can be like a stage in life or, a lot going on or like general stress, not as direct. And that's another way for other reasons, I would say, to
No, I
be
agree.
uncomfortable or where we have this urge, like, I would like to be more comfortable.
No, it's I agree. I mean, you can almost range it from like a physical sensation to a mental sensation, like physically, like okay, I'm in the cold. I want a jacket that just keeps me warm, so I can be comfortable being in this uncomfortable setting. Or you're having a conversation with a colleague, and you're kind of like, oof, I don't know which way this is gonna go, so I feel really uneasy. And I actually have a few friends who actually, love making others feel uncomfortable in order to make themselves feel comfortable. And I'm like, not really the
Mm,
direction we want to go down. But yeah, for
that's interesting, right? Yeah. Yeah.
it is. It's almost like a deflection, like right. It's a defense mechanism that goes right. Rather than me feel it, I'll let you feel it, and then that allow me to somehow find a norm.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting point.
We'll
How
come
we
back to that
behave
then.
socially to because it's a lot. I think it's one of the common ways we feel uncomfortable with like conversations or maybe in social settings, or it could apply to networking, or it could apply to having deep personal conversations, or some kind of social setting where maybe people are showing off a little bit, and then some people, exactly as you say, have this urge or this kind of trick to make others feel uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, I think of, and this is not to generalize, but I think of like maybe like leadership. You might come into, a meeting with your boss, and it's almost like they might do that to be alpha, to be the number one in
Hmm.
the room, to almost set the stage of like, let's just make this very clear. I'm in charge, you're not.
Yes.
So,
Hmm.
and that allows them to suddenly feel comfortable, making you feel uncomfortable to get whatever they want across.
Mm.
Uh, and I don't know. I'm even wondering if sometimes subconsciously parents do that, peers do that. Whether yeah, now suddenly that's kind of it opened up a different perspective on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thought. Okay,
Interesting. Yeah, that's like one of the directions we could take this, right?
totally.
Because it's kind of a recommended sales technique. It's this thing that is talked about in these dating books, right?
Yeah,
Where guys try to pick up women, and with the like sales on social media as well. You have these tips which are basically about taking charge and making the other person feel uncomfortable. Fundamentally, I don't like that idea.
No, I agree. Not to joke about it, but yeah, you think about dating, you walk into a bar and you see someone attractive and you want to knock them down a peg or two, and you're like, okay, you might just make that kind of backhanded comment to throw them off and something like, oh, she doesn't find me attractive, so suddenly I need to kind of regain a bit of footing. And so it's making
Hmm.
that person feel uneasy so the other person's like, right, I've got higher ground, I can now manage this and lead this, as opposed to kind of make it a journey, like a partnership that can kind of go in one direction.
Exactly. And I think related to what you're saying, it's also about, um, people want validation more or less. And if you withhold that validation, you put yourself in a position of power. And again, like I think it's a nasty thing to do. I don't think people should put up with it. But, it is exactly as you say, this underhanded comment or something like that is kind of a negotiation technique or whatever you want to call it.
No,
And yeah, there are probably a few elements to it. You mentioned like take them down a peg or two, and it like puts you in a position of power. And I think this, withholding validation is related to that. And there might be other things going on there as well. But
no,
basically, it's nothing I recommend.
no, it's not. But I think I think it's worth, as you mentioned, kind of one of the directions to go in. Let me take it back a couple notches. So part of the reason why I find this to be a fascinating topic is, growing up, I observed like my father and his temper. It would last for only a couple of seconds, couple of minutes, but it would like go from 0 to 200 miles an hour and then back down to zero. And
Mm.
for me, I never got to really understand or express kind of the ranges in between 0 and 200. So for me, my natural tendency then was to also do the same, to go from 0 to 200, and not throttle in between. And I had a conversation with my sister about it a couple of years back, and she's like, you know what? We weren't raised to understand that you don't have to go straight from 0 to that level. You can slowly but surely progress. Um, and so for me, I realized I had a trigger. And whenever somebody put me in an uncomfortable situation, my immediate reaction was, ugh, and so whether someone was trying to withhold a compliment or validation, whether someone was trying to take charge, um, whether they were senior to me or even at my same level, or junior, I just felt like I couldn't control how I felt. And that would make me immediately flutter and just go straight to
Yeah,
frustration and anger.
yeah, yeah.
So
So you
maybe,
identified someone was saying something. So maybe you could say a bit more about this. It's basically someone is telling you something that makes you uncomfortable, like criticism or
Mhm.
using an aggressive tone. I'm curious, like what they would do, and then how it would make you feel.
Yeah, I think I would the perfect example is someone makes a sarcastic comment or a belittling comment out of jest, just for a laugh. But you suddenly, it strikes a core. And at that moment, that core, you feel, and we've talked about this before, you suddenly feel defensive,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like you need to almost explain yourself, or they need to explain themselves. And for those that are watching us right now, you're seeing me kind of like take a step back, because it's
Mm.
almost like a verbal comment that does make you. And you then, I would notice that my heartbeat would elevate, like I'd get warm, you get a bit shaky. And I suddenly, like, it was almost like a comment became very visceral. I felt it physically. And so for that reason, so whether it was my dad getting upset with me and giving me a lecture, or whether a friend was like kind of giving me a joke, it just caused that sensation. And I just feel incredibly uncomfortable. And I wouldn't be able to think clearly. And, again, you think back to kind of that fight or flight,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the situation, I do one or the other. I wouldn't just find a way to kind of calm myself. So I wouldn't be able to throttle.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
that, I mean, even just kind of sharing that right now, like I feel funny, like it's a weird sensation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So you really feel it, like when you get into it and when you talk about it.
yeah, like even like
Yeah.
right now, like I suddenly
Yeah.
feel very heavy. It's almost kind of like remembering those kind of comments, those feelings, and how I always think about it. It's a trigger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So whether if you made a comment to me hypothetically and that
Mm.
triggered me, you wouldn't know, right? There are others that might know those are your triggers, and so they might,
Mm.
like you said, they might make a comment to an underhanded comment to kind of gain that upper
Sure.
hand.
So I'm
Uh,
curious. Sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you, but
No,
now that
please.
you're having this, sensation, we can pick up on it. Like, so what does it actually feel like in your body?
So I feel my body temperature rise. So I feel very warm. Uh, don't know if my voice indicates it, but a bit shaky.
Mm.
Um, I feel it's funny. I feel like a bit of a soreness, like a tightness in the back of my neck, and yeah, I feel almost in a way like my train of thought is somehow clouded. Like I
Mm.
don't feel
Yeah,
very
yeah.
clear.
And how would you say, like, having had this sensations a few times, how bad is it right now on a scale of from 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being horrible, I would say I'm probably right now, fortunately, maybe at a 3 or a 4.
Mm-hmm.
And not to crack the joke, but it's like temperature could be rising. Like, so I think I found a way to
Mm.
kind of almost keep it from going straight to 10. Like, so it's kind of almost like a dial. It's slowly growing, but like
Mm.
it's holding around 3 or 4,
Mm-hmm.
but enough to feel it.
Yeah, yeah. And is it more like on one side of your body than the other?
No, I would say so. It's upper body. I feel it's almost like my back. So my back
Mm.
more so than my chest. So yeah, it's kind of almost lower back, neck, down my back, upper back. Yeah,
Mm.
it's funny. I'm almost even feeling like the temperature is like could be sweating a little bit. It's
Mm-hmm.
weird. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure, it's interesting. I believe in describing these things in very simple terms, but
yeah,
there are, of course, also physiological explanations, right, in terms of hormones and like adrenaline and these kind of things that are related to fight or flight and that are triggered. It also reminds me of the conversation we had about ego, right? So I think
yeah.
there are two. Makes me think about the ego in terms of what is it that's being triggered? Which part of you is not responding well to whatever it might be, right? The slight, the criticism, the tone, some part of you. And again, like coming back to that conversation, what you'll find actually is that there's no part of your being that can be offended. But of course, it doesn't feel like that in the moment.
Hmm.
It's not actually your neck is feeling hot. No one said anything about your neck.
Correct.
That kind of, you see where that approach could go. And the other is just if you can experience the sensations without judging them, going about it in a curious way, like, oh, it's warm, that's interesting, I wonder where the warmth come from, or is it more on the back or the front or the left or the right, and you describe it, and then you do something else, chat, look out the window, and then you come back to what does this temperature and neck sensation feel like now.
Right now, it's actually gone back down to like a 2, a 1, 2.
See?
It's cooled. Yeah,
Yeah. It goes quickly, right?
it does.
So, what does that tell us?
That it's not lasting. That your body can adjust. Um, and it's interesting. It's not like you distracted me in order to have that feeling or sensation to kind of dissipate. You just kind of, like you said, you just asked me about it, described it, and talked it through.
Mm,
And by talking it through, it just kind of naturally came down.
yeah. So, I think that starts with an attitude that we can have towards ourselves where we're curious about the sensations in the body. And then that attitude makes us less uncomfortable. And every sensation and every feeling and every thought has a right to be there. And we approach it with curiosity and accept them. And then we basically drop it and talk about something else. And then when you check in again, just 30 seconds later or whatever it was, it's gone. And that usually makes us happy, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, actually, the physical sensation dissipated very quickly. The pain goes away very quickly. But the mental suffering, that's the part that we can control or not, that's the part that can escalate. If we start judging ourselves, like, why do I do this to myself? You know, my dad taught me this thing that's not helping me. I did the same thing last year, and now I'm going to get myself into trouble. Then you can see how you escalate it in your mind, right? How the thinking mind creates the suffering from that initial point of pain or discomfort or some sensation in the body that was, yeah, uncomfortable.
It's interesting how, in that sense, that the physical can recover faster than the mental, and the mental continues that, whatever that sensation or that just the inner voice will start to just kind of spiral and just. I want to go back to kind of what you mentioned there on mental escalation. So and how the physical can let's say subside. I go back to it's not even hypothetical. It's a real example. You know, whether it's my father giving me a lecture, whether it's a peer, whether it's an argument, whether it's a conversation with my girlfriend or someone's partner. You don't maybe give yourself that opportunity in that moment to let's say stop that trigger. So it's almost like a machine gun, right? Someone's pulling the trigger back and forth. And like, it's like escalate. And you go from 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 explosion. You don't, how do you, let me pause there. How would you then, Fred, in that circumstance, almost.
Sorry, I just lost you actually.
Oh, can you hear me now? Fred, can you hear me okay?
I think you're back now.
Yeah, cool. Yep. Awesome. My question was.
You said escalate. How do
escalate and you explode. In those moments, so, you know, we on one-to-one, we were both very kind of like, okay, hey, Neil, you know, without even saying, you know, pause, you know, you just kind of it naturally allowed me to kind of calm down.
Yeah.
But when you're in a situation where it's rat-a-tat-tat, machine gun, kind of almost like, you know, attack after attack, bullet after bullet, how would you calm yourself in a similar way? Like, what would you do?
Yeah. I feel like the difficulty that you're highlighting there is, of course, now I'm not triggered at all, right? So I can focus on you. We talk about the sensation. We talk openly and honestly about this. And, you know, I have a couple of tricks to de-escalate that, right? To unwind that. Of course, if you're in a heated conversation, the other person is triggered too. That's the problem. So you have two people going through the same thing of like not liking the sensation in their body, blaming the other person for it, and then, you know, the conversation is heating up. You're not thinking clearly. You start, you know, saying things that aren't true or that, you know, that on purpose hurt the other person. And of course, that's much more difficult. So I think it makes sense to start with easy conversations, to start also with the people that you have ongoing relationships with, to maybe have a chat that says like, well, this is what triggers me, what triggers you. Let's try to, you know, be kind and gentle with each other, avoid the triggers or to highlight it when it comes up, to ask for a minute to, you know, calm down and have a proper discussion, not to avoid the discussion, but to have a productive discussion. Um, I think that that's possible, you know, in some constellations and in some relationships. And then, you know, at work, in big meetings, it's trickier, right? There could be a lot of people talking at the same time. And there could be a lot of people, you know, triggered in different ways and having learned different tools and self defense mechanisms throughout their lives of how to deal with this. Some people go quiet, some people try to be funny, some people get very loud or even physical. Um, and yeah, you know, nothing off the top of my head, but I'm sure if we talked about it for a couple of minutes, we'd come up with some good ideas.
No, I think that's fair. So let's maybe I'll just give that a bit of a. So I think when it comes to as an initial approach, when it's just two people, I really love how you said that, Bud. Was, hey, start with those easier conversations. You know, give yourself highlight that trigger. Hey, just real quick, not to that actually is triggering me. I'm feeling a bit uneasy right now, and then let me describe how I'm feeling, and then ask for a moment to almost like, you know, not, yeah, just to kind of, as you said, to be able to kind of drop it and then revisit it 30 seconds later, whether it be the sensation or the topic, to kind of then see where you can go. And I think clearly that would hopefully be in a trusting relationships, trusting conversation with someone that you can be open with,
Mm.
um, who would nurture that. I love that. I think that's beautiful. Um, I was listening to a cast on the weekend between Brené Brown and Tim Ferriss, and she kind of mentioned how she has conversations with her husband, and so they'll have a chat, and she'll be like, "I'm right now 20%. How are you?" And he's like, "Well, I'm 40%." And she's like, "Well,
Mm.
jointly we're 60% and not 100%. So what do we need to do so that we can jointly get to 100%? Do we need to drop something that we're doing? Do we need to drop something that we're doing for someone else?" And it's almost like, I think it's kind of cool when you can have that kind of open dialogue with someone and find how you can get to 100% together uh,
Mm.
in the midst of a conversation. So
I think that's great.
yeah, so I love that. Now I want to come back to what you mentioned about those trickier moments when you're in a professional setting, or maybe someone that's not trusting, or a group, and how can you manage through that, being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So let me set the scene for you from a personal example, and we can kind of dig in and see what we can find from it. So, you know, currently I'm in a situation where my business is going through a restructure, and we've got a weekly meeting, and the conversation is meant to be on business topics, but at the same time, we're quite conscious as a close group of friends and colleagues um, how we would use that time to almost give our temperature and how we feel. Now, I'm not going to share specific examples because I don't want to like violate the trust of that group and of my peers and
Sure,
my
of
friends.
course.
But what I would say is, if we kind of almost take that as an example and go, okay, so when you're in a group setting, all remote, difficult, let's say macro circumstances, difficult environment, how do we all manage to be comfortable being uncomfortable when we're with each other or away from each other? And what I've found at the start, when let's say a couple months ago when we start, I'd probably be the guy that would crack the joke, try to be funny, try to lighten the scenario, lighten the environment. And then afterwards, I'd feel like, ooh, was that the right thing to do? People maybe weren't in the mood to have a laugh. It almost belittles their,
Mm.
how they felt. And then my mind would start to run. Oh crap, I shouldn't have done that. Let me wait till the next week to then, and then following week, I stayed quiet, and I got a call afterwards saying, "Hey, why were you quiet? You didn't need to go quiet. Like, what was wrong? Are you okay?" Um, and then there were another time where I got loud and funny. So my point is, I
Mm-hmm.
share this with you because, obviously I'm going to look at myself in this, because it's, how do I feel comfortable being comfortable in that setting in a natural state?
Mm.
Um, so maybe let me kind of put that to you, Fred, kind of from what you've heard. I think you're right. It's not as tricky because at the end of the day, it's me, and this is like, I'm one way on a screen. But what would be your initial kind of observations from that, in terms of kind of how I'm reacting in that uncomfortable situation?
Yeah. As you were saying before, your reaction is based on like what's worked in other settings, or what you think has worked or what you were taught to do. Um, and I think it's great that you're aware of this, right? Because we all have triggers and we all have situations where we don't respond optimally in hindsight, or, where some more creativity or clear thinking could have produced a better outcome. And once you realize that, you're on the path, right? Of self-discovery and personal development. And you think about these situations, and this is clearly one where you're getting on it, right? Where you're saying, like, this is a situation that I would respond better to. I want to respond better to. And for me, that's the key. Like, once you've done that, you've done half the job. And your initial response is like what you were taught through example and through practice to do.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have the opportunity to change that if you want to.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I find it interesting, mate, because each person in that group are on their own path to self-discovery. Everyone's on their own path to their own level of awareness. I want to talk about awareness for a second. So I do feel that when you're uncomfortable, and I mentioned earlier how I felt a bit mentally clouded, or that inner voice started to take over and going, why are you feeling this way? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. And how do you, make, is awareness something that you feel you can maintain, or you almost have to find a way to go back to it?
Mm. I think, yeah, both, right?
Okay.
If
Yeah.
I'm understanding you correctly, you want to remain aware of all the important things going on, your state, and so on. And then sometimes, I guess we lose that contact. Our attention goes in a direction where we miss something. We don't see that we get triggered. We don't see that we get excited. We might not see how someone else is responding, which is relevant to the situation. And then we have to, that has to click back in. Sometimes our attention totally goes out the window, right?
Hmm.
So for me, attention and awareness go together in that way. So I like the way, you use those words and how you brought up awareness. So for me, awareness is like the big sphere of everything that you are aware of, and
Hmm.
then you direct your attention within that. And sometimes it just all goes out the window and we don't control where our attention goes, and that all the relevant things are actually in awareness. It's a bit like driving a car, right? You are kind of looking at 10 different things, and then the car in front of you slows down and all of your attention goes there. And at that time you're missing some other things. So it kind of narrows. So something like the having a flashlight and having a naked light bulb in the ceiling, something that shines very broadly a little bit on everything, and something that really shines a spotlight on one thing. And those things go together. And as you said before, with self-awareness, once you become aware of these processes, ideally you keep them more or less in awareness. But sometimes you lose it, and then you have to bring it back, like, hey, am I, am I in the kind of zone that I want to be to have this conversation?
Hmm.
And you realize, like, ooh, I lost it there for a second. I probably need to. And then, whatever. I feel like we haven't quite gotten to the answer yet, right? We're kind of tiptoeing a little bit around it. We're setting the scene. And then the question is like, right, so what do you do specifically?
Well, so I'm ready to jump in a bit. All right. So let
Mm-hmm.
me cannonball. Let me give this a try. So I love, again, I love what you're saying, because when you say awareness, you do both, right? You can either go back to it or you remain in it. And so I want to go on the back of that. Um, I think in those situations, I do remind myself to be aware. So I think on more recent calls, awareness of my breath, something that I know is very important to you in terms of how's my breathing. Like even right now, when I'm talking to you, I have to remind myself to breathe. Like don't hold the breath, because as soon as you do, it's like, oh. So
Mm.
how's my breathing, right? Get the breathing back to normal. What are my surroundings? So just being aware. Now, granted, if we're on a Zoom call, it's just like, okay, I'm in my place, but it's like almost the surroundings could be your screen. So who you're talking to and what's the dynamic and just what's going on, and just being aware of it. And then almost like you said earlier, and how are you feeling? Like, so, okay, now you're breathing okay. You're aware of your surroundings. Are you aware of how you're feeling? Are you feeling uneasy? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling funny? How are you feeling? And I think just by starting down that path, you start to feel a bit more relaxed in an uncomfortable setting.
Mm.
And I kind of think, again, from personal experience, like there are times where I think I've actually said time out to conversations, and I've said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I need to pause for a second, and I need to go, can we revisit this topic
Yeah.
later? Or I was once on a call with someone, and this person really made a few comments directly, indirectly. And I kind of said, okay, pause. And I actually said, time out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call you back in 30 minutes. We need to just get back to a baseline.
Yeah.
Um, I think on one of these calls, turned my video off, and I just kind of took a walk around my flat, and I said, okay, let me just give
Mm-hmm.
myself a minute to come back to and reground. Obviously not easy to do if you're in the room think standing up and walking out may not be the best.
No.
But just how do you find a way when you're in the room to almost kind of just come out of your consciousness, almost kind of come out of your body and just observe and just exit for a
Yeah,
moment?
yeah. Mm.
So I kind of, I mean,
Right.
not to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
all
yeah.
spiritual and like all that, whatever, but like a bit of that.
Sure, sure. I
What's,
think what
what's,
you're saying
go
is
ahead.
very clever, and there is a parallel between what we do with ourselves and what we do with other people. So the lesson for ourselves that you outlined was like check in with the breath, right? I think
Yeah.
that's great, especially if you practice that at other times. It really helps you to reconnect with that calm quickly.
Yep.
But I think it really works for everyone just to see what the breath is doing right now, and then maybe to take one or two slightly deeper breaths. And if it's possible to exhale slowly, it's another nice little trick that's physiologically relaxing. If it's possible to go like, for example.
Hmm.
So, and you're saying as well to take a walk around the room, something like that. Um, and I think it goes along with what we said before, which is there's a combination of accepting the feelings. So it might start with noting, like, I feel A, B, C, and D, and that's okay, and being curious about it. And then, um, and then distracting yourself rather than distracting yourself straight away and kind of denying that those sensations are going on, because then that's when the head starts spinning, right?
Hmm.
So I think we outlined some good kind of tips and tricks for how to do it with ourselves. And then the question is, what's the parallel for the group? How can you do the same thing with the group in order to for everyone to check in or to lower the temperature of the conversation? And so just to start that off, in conflict resolution, there's something about like just listening to the other person and repeating what they say. It's like to get people to repeat things. I repeat it myself. I ask them, did I understand that correctly? It slows everything down. So we're not rushing, we're not moving on. You feel like you had something to say. I'm not grabbing that ball and running in a different direction about, what I'm feeling or what I'm going through. I'm staying with you and I'm repeating what you said. And then everything slows down and people realize, oh, well, what's really important here? What are we really talking about? And then, they might reassess. So there's something there in a conversation about slowing the conversation down by repeating things. That was my first stab at that.
Amazing. And I'm going to go back to almost one of the last words you used, slowing things down. And if I go back to my early analogy of, that speedometer, that throttle going from 0 to 200 miles an hour, the goal is that's not sustainable. It's not healthy. So how do you bring that dial back down? How do you slow things down
Mm.
so that you have the time to ensure that you are breathing, you're aware of your surroundings, you're curious about how you're feeling, you're mindful of the room, you're present, you're not disconnecting, detaching, kind of going off in la la land and thinking about what you're going to do that weekend. You're trying to remain present, because you have a role to play in that group. And I love how you also said, like, what's the parallel for the group, and you know, I think that listen and repeat is fantastic, because what it does is almost it's kind of interesting. Imagine if like someone did say something quite underhanded to you, and you're like, right, so let me repeat what you're saying. You're saying dot dot dot, and I wonder if that person who just made that underhanded comment would kind of respond to that coming back to them and being like, either, yeah, I said that, or did I say that? Or I
Yeah,
didn't really
yeah.
mean that. And how it
Mm.
can just kind of, reset the I'm gonna say the playing field, to reset just
Yes. Mm-hmm.
the environment a bit. And I think sometimes that's what we need to do. It's just we're hitting the reset button. It's kind of funny when your computer goes haywire or whatever. It's like set it back to just hit reset, so it goes back to
Yes. Mm-hmm.
settings. I think that's brilliant. And I love that. I think it's a very simple way for us to approach. When you feel uncomfortable and you want to be comfortable, what can you do to kind of hit the reset, to kind of come back to square one and go, okay, what's going on here? and how do I
Yeah.
now need to readjust in
Mm.
order to thrive, to be my best self, to be productive, to contribute, to be receptive,
Yes.
to be aware. No.
So I feel like we develop these tools for ourselves, and they also become tools that we can share with others very implicitly. So we slow our own response down, and we can do that with other people by making sure we've understood. And as you say, it can be very effective. Like if someone insults us, repeating the insult, might make them uncomfortable, but I think it can have the desired effect. We often also talk about the vibe in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I feel like we take it as a given, like, oh, it was a bad vibe. And then the question is, well, what can you do to change that? Um, and the more influence you have, the more you can impact, or maybe the more presence you have, the more you can actually influence the vibe in the room. That when you walk in the room, when you're on the call, if you're breathing calmly, if you have, the right attitude that you want to bring into it, that's also going to impact everyone in a very subtle way.
I
And of
agree.
course, I feel like I'm talking about the easy scenario there when, maybe when you're starting out or when it's not too heated. And in order to challenge ourselves, we're talking about the situations when it really gets heated and maybe a few people are involved. And we started with, listening and repeating what someone says. I think breathing slowly can model that for other people.
Mm-hmm.
People copy these physiological cues unconsciously. So I think it helps to model that. Um, Even if there's a parallel with the trusting relationship where you just talk about it openly, maybe here you don't want to talk about it as openly, but sometimes it works to be a little bit more vulnerable. It shows a level of maturity to say that, hey, I notice myself getting a bit triggered here. I don't know what you guys are feeling, or this might seem like an odd comment, but I'm feeling this. And so I just want to take a couple of breaths. I don't know, maybe that's not right for everyone, but it, you know, it's an idea.
No, I agree. On that, on being vulnerable. So it's funny. So I once in a meeting, we were chatting about vulnerability, and my boss was like, "Hey, we all need to be more vulnerable. We need to be more open. We need to be a bit more in the moment, present." And I, again, not to quote her, Brené Brown, she's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I asked the room, I said, what's people's definition of vulnerability? Because I think it's different, right? I mean,
Mm.
and I got more of a common definition of transparency, being open about how you feel. And I quoted her and I said, well, for her, it's showing up and not controlling the outcome. And what I love about what you said there in terms of, you know, being present and being vulnerable in that setting and almost not controlling the outcome. It's like, look, this is how I'm going to be. And I'm going to be true to myself. I'm going to be true to all of you. And, I'm going to be open and share how either, hey, I feel uncomfortable or feeling a bit uneasy, or, hey, this topic is not that, and not controlling the outcome,
Mm.
not trying to steer it to, I want us all to be comfortable, or I want us all to be less combative, or I want us all to be, it's just, hey, this is what's happening. What do you guys think? And giving yourself that moment, the group that moment, because I think that's something I don't think we really do. We don't think we can do. We can hit reset for a whole room. I think that's possible. I think there are
Mm.
corporate cultures that probably don't support that. And then there are cultures that do support that. And hopefully we're all moving in a way where they do. You hit that reset button and go, is this really is this really how we all feel?
Mm.
Okay, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
And then
Mm.
I think that we need to do more of that, Fred, because just from a corporate professional background, it's great to do it one to one with an individual or a partner. Like my girlfriend and we had a chat on the weekend, and it was a very deep conversation. But I think we were able to kind of mirror each other and kind of be vulnerable. And but I think when you're in a room full of high powered execs where egos reign supreme, how do you find that way to hit that reset button and bring everyone back to ground level on the same
Mm.
level, and then progress to ensure that the decisions you're taking or making are benefiting all, or at least uh, grounded in substance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really nice what you said there about benefiting all. That in itself is a good way to do it, right? It
Mm-hmm.
works for us as individuals. when we say, let me come back to what's important here. Why was I doing this? Why was I putting myself in this uncomfortable situation? Well, it's because I wanted to achieve something, so this discomfort is not always bad. And I think the same can be true for the group. And now as I think about it, I hope it doesn't sound too cheesy, but like reminding people that we do have some shared goals and that in the end we want the same things, but we disagree about how to get there. Maybe. So maybe that can create some common ground and can also reset in terms of we are actually in some ways at least on the same team. Not to be naive about people having different incentives and all those kind of things and the egos as you mentioned, but it seems like another way that might work at some points. And as you also said, we have to be in the moment, right? You're not controlling the outcome, but in the moment, you're picking a tool, a direction where you want to nudge everyone to say, how do we calm this down? How do we get in a better direction?
Yeah.
How do we get everyone maybe to check in with the sensations in our body or to verbalize or, maybe to write something down? It's another trick that works, again, both for the individual and maybe for the group, if there's a group version of doing a little bit of journaling.
No, again, I don't think, well, at least from I don't know of any company where they go, hey, let's all journal how we're feeling before, during, or after a session. But I think, I mean, I was speaking to a very close friend yesterday evening. He's like, Neil, what you're going through right now, journalize the heck out of it, because it's going to happen again. And it'd be great to be able to reference back to, so how did you feel? And what did you do? And why did you do that? And, what came of it? And did it work? And if it did, then repeat that recipe for success. It'd be interesting if you told a room to say, hey, for the next month, we're going to have these weekly meetings. Just everyone after the meeting, just write down how you felt. And then next week, read it before the start of the meeting and then jot down and almost just keep track of it. Because I think, it's a record. It's a reference point. Are things improving or not as a group, as an individual? I think journalizing
that can work. I was thinking a slightly different version. I think the two things are complementary. We're talking a little bit before about the detail, the sensation of what you're feeling right now, and then the grand scheme of things. And those go together. So, for example, it might not be in most corporate settings like, let's journal how we're feeling right now, but it might be, we're actually due to have a break. During the break, why don't you all jot down some things of, whatever that topic was about, right? So then it's in a very subtle way, like, we want to pick up on this, so let's make sure we don't lose the thread. So I encourage you to write a few points down that you want to bring into the next discussion. And then when people are writing, they're not going to write the insults, right?
Mm-hmm.
As they're writing, as they're looking at the pen and the paper and the blue ink, those sensations are going to dissipate. And then you're going to write down, things in a more clear way.
But I might, so I have a friend of mine who's like, the whole, the bullshit paper, the fuck it paper, like where you literally write down like, fuck this, and this is bullshit.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, no, but so I'm just saying hypothetically, people might write down something negative and shitty.
They could,
but then they might reread it later on and go, I don't really think that. Like, okay, I may have said that, I may have written it, but I don't. No. That's not me. That's just in the heat of the moment. And they realize heat of the moment. Okay, so it's better. I've written it down in black and white. I wouldn't want to say that, let alone write that down.
Exactly.
So I think, but I just love it. It doesn't have to be, touchy feely, like jot down how you feel and how's it.
Yeah.
It could just be, just jot down your thoughts, your ideas, and what you're thinking. And you never know what could come of it. But to your point, it does give people that opportunity to be aware, breathe, slow down, be present, and allow that discomfort to kind of progress to comfort, to progress to insight, to progress to a revelation. And I think this is feasible, possible, whether it be individual, couple, friends, or partners, or peers in a business setting. I just can imagine myself raising my hand in the room, or not that we raise our hand these days, just say, hey folks, what if we try this out for a month or a couple of weeks and just see how it goes? Like, I love how we always talk about, it's like, just be playful with it, be curious about it. Just don't take it too seriously and see if it works. Hey, thumbs up. And if it doesn't work, okay, great. You try something else, but at least you have a reference point.
I agree. I think that's, again, another nice parallel between what works individually and what might work for a group. And for me, that comes back to experimentation and practice. If we can define an experiment, or if we can define a practice, and the way you're saying it is driven by curiosity, right? Which is nice. I think that often works. Hey, let's try this. Let's give this a shot. And then, that might resonate with people. There's also an element there, we're talking about having this heated discussion, and then, sometimes the meeting ends. And it made me think of, there's a way something has been opened up, things were said, and you want to give people a safe landing. So maybe there's another way there to just unwind a bit of the tension, to get people back to ground. Also, where when they hang up, they don't feel terrible about the thing, and they're going to be hesitant to have the next meeting. And I think that's how you get into bigger problems as well, that it changes this dynamic. So by changing something in the form of the meeting, by letting everyone have like a final comment or something like that, people might feel that it kind of gets wrapped up in a nice way. The worst part of it gets unwound, before it's time for everyone to hang up.
I like that. I was on a call yesterday that started a bit uneasy, and then towards the end, we kind of said, "Hey, how are y'all feeling?" And one person says something, and I kind of jumped in. I said, "Well, actually, I kind of see it differently." And people are like, "Yeah, okay, cool." And like, and then that person's like, "Yeah, actually, I meant it more that way." And that, yeah, and we found common ground. And I think something that's incredibly special with a group, whether you're all marching towards the same goal or in different directions, is when you can find that common ground. I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
I think it's like you said, it's a great way to kind of bring everyone back to square one, or hey, it's square 10, and you got common ground, and that's progress. Fred, there are a couple of words that have kind of resonated with me throughout this, and kind of just as we sum up, I love how we say it's about being aware, it's about breathing, it's about slowing things down, it's about that quote unquote reset that might be needed. It's about being present. It's about curiosity to try new things, see how it works, whether it's, again, individual, in a pair, or in a group setting, corporate or not. I love the idea just here at the end about, finding that common ground. It's how writing things down can sometimes actually be powerful, and maybe even more powerful than what we realize that we say. I mean, one of reading, I've got the 4 agreements on my desk here in front of me, and one of the things I think the first agreement is, be impeccable with your word. And I think, when you calm down and reset and you're aware, I think the ability to be impeccable with your word can actually enable that comfort from discomfort. Any thoughts from your side, bud?
Well, just that I think you just modeled another good way to do it, which is to summarize. So it's nice to end with a summary to bring back those main points and to shed light and to reinforce the memories of that, and to wrap up on a positive, thoughtful note. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. I reinforce the memory. Again, you go back to what we started when I kind of said, hey, what kind of made me feel uneasy was a memory of having a difficult conversation, whether it's with a friend or with my father. And I think what's cool is, as you practice this, you will summarize and create new memories of how you overcame discomfort. And I think that will just reinforce that you are capable, that you can do this, and that
Exactly.
that discomfort can only lead to growth, and just keep it coming, keep it going. Love
Wonderful.
it, man. Hey, Fred, as always, thank you very much. Folks from Live, Breathe, Believe, you can catch us again on YouTube. You can catch us on podcast. You can find Fred on his website. But in the meantime, big hugs, heaps of love. Take care, everyone. Take care, Fred.
Thank you.